Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, it's Adam here, and welcome to my podcast, the FigureItOutcast for October 2018. If I sound a little off to you, it's because I actually am nursing a bit of a cold at the moment, so I do apologize for that, but we must press on here. So, the nature of this podcast is that it comes out early for Patreon backers, however, it does eventually become public for the rest of you, so thank you very much for listening either way, and if you're on Patreon, again, thank you for your support, or you can consider supporting me on Patreon, much appreciated. But anyway, so we're just going to go ahead and talk about a whole host of subjects here. There's a list in the description. Feel free to skip around to different time codes to see what you like, what you don't like, whatever. Because of the fact, frankly, that I'm kind of sick and it's going to be hard to prevent, coughing and stuff, I do apologize if any of that kind of stuff comes in, or sniffling or whatever. Again, sorry. But I thought it'd be kind of more interesting this time to do some power round subjects. So this might be a shorter podcast than usual, but I think we'll be covering more subjects. So let's just start with it. First off, hopefully you guys have been having you guys had a good month. Hopefully some exciting stuff happened to you. And hopefully everything's all right with you. On my end, it's been a little weird because this has been a very strange year. I've been, bouncing around from thing to thing to thing, which we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But yeah, this has been weird because I've had like a few almost uninterrupted weeks at home, and it's weird because I almost like don't know what to do. You work on videos and all that kind of stuff, and but I don't know, it's strange. It's good though. It's good. But yeah, aside from that, let's get on with some news subjects. First thing I wanted to talk about. Now, this is of course been out there for a little while, but I wanted to give my 2 cents. TellTale Studios, as I'm sure a lot of you guys heard, they are a game developer and publisher. They would publish occasionally titles they didn't work on, like the console version of 7 Days to Die, but what they were better known for was basically interactive cinema video games. Their best project as far as global awareness was the Walking Dead game, which won, Game of the Year and all that stuff. The game, however, that I always really loved them for was Jurassic Park the game and Back to the Future the game. If you've been watching my channel, or if you've, been around for a while, or maybe just saw this in happenstance, I loved those games so much and the stories they contained that I actually did this thing where I captured all their footage and I edited the footage into what I consider to be very cohesive films. It's called Jurassic Park 1.5, and then I made a Back to the Future 4 and 5 out of it. And a lot of people say, oh, it's cool, it's like a Let's Play. It's like, no, it's not a Let's Play. It goes way beyond that. Like, the amount of work that went into that, like playing it a bunch of times to make sure the story structure would function, and then coming up with creative ways to edit around stuff so that the story would flow like a movie as opposed to flowing like a video game. It was kind of combining my film degree with the fact that I love video games and the story structure in video games, because they're not the same thing. So getting them to blend harmoniously was a feat. And I'm not saying that for myself. I was an editor, whatever. The people who made that possible was TellTale. The fact that they were clearly a video game company that loved visual and interactive storytelling. And so I tip my hat to them because I think they're going to be very missed. On the shorthand, I'm going to miss the fact that, of course, now we're never going to get the follow-up to that Back to the Future game, that there's never going to be another one, or another Jurassic Park game akin to that. I mean, I don't even think they have the license for it anymore. I don't know who has the Back to the Future game license now, but yeah, I'm sad about that. But I'm not going to lie, at the same time, like, I wasn't really following much of what TellTale was doing anymore. I know they had been working on some Batman stuff, and they had been kind of continuing that theme and that genre, but I don't know how much of it actually resonated with people. What's a real shame is that they weren't ever able to do like a Ghostbusters game while Harold Ramis was still alive, because in theory then you could have had more of a third movie type of thing. I mean, we had that Ghostbusters the game by Atari a few years back, and that's kind of the closest thing to it, but if TellTale had been at the helm, you would have had a more story-driven game. Which could have been very interesting. So I'm going to miss them as far as that goes, because they're really the only guys out there who understood film narrative at the same time as understanding game narrative. Most game developers don't, and they don't need to. They're making games, they're not making movies, but TellTale got both, and they found a good way to blend them, and they proved it was possible with those games. And I'll never forget, on a very personal level, after that those Back to the Future videos I made came out, I got a lot of people saying, in the comments, like, in before, the ban hammer, in before copyright strike, and all those type of things. Nothing like that ever happened from them. In fact, the only thing that ever happened was in like a month or two after it had been released, I actually got a very nice letter from TellTale, a digital letter, not like a physical letter. They just emailed me, basically just, you know, saying that they appreciated the work I had done in that because they had always been curious if that would work, and that I had satisfied that curiosity. So on a personal level, I'm going to miss them for that reason, because I know, at least having talked to them briefly, that it was a goal of theirs to make stuff like that possible. So miss you guys, and I hope at least the people who are working there go out and get jobs. As for their current situation, basically there's a few employees left just trying to wrap up required projects, and I think they're trying to pass off certain projects to other development studios. Like, they were part of the way through another Walking Dead game, and I think they're trying to pass that off to someone else to finish it now. And that'll be probably the last project with their hands on it. Very sad, but yeah, that is what it is. So we will move forward here. Speaking of sad things that actually might make a comeback in some sense, Toys R Us. So Toys R Us, as I'm sure a lot of you know, not too long ago went out of business. They shut down all their stores in the US and in most countries around the world. Some of them survived. I believe Canada it survived, and I think Japan it survived. But they were kind of just a name under another owner. But recently what happened here, at the time I record this anyway, is they canceled their auction to to sell off their name. And apparently the move is to try and reinvent the brand in some capacity. Now, a lot of people are jumping on that to think like, oh, Toys R Us is just coming back. That's just how it's going to work. I don't think so. I think Toys R Us is just... Toys R Us as a name has value, but that's about it. I wouldn't be surprised if, like... This is just an example. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon has, like, its toy department become named Toys R Us or something like that. Just kind of a subsidiary name to attach itself to another pre-existing brand. Just because the name Toys R Us automatically tells you a lot. So anybody who's selling toys, most likely a digital outlet, will just want to pick up the name. I don't really think we're going to get a return to a big box store that actually says Toys R Us on it. This is kind of like when people heard, oh, Atari's coming back with the Atari box or Atari VCS. Like, they're coming back. No, they're not. They're throwing the person who owns their name is throwing it onto something to make a buck. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen with Toys R Us, is they're going to throw their name onto something. I wouldn't be surprised if the same type of thing happens with Blockbuster at some point. I think that Captain Marvel actually has a good chance of raising, if you guys saw the trailer for Captain Marvel, I think that has a good chance of raising the value of the name of Blockbuster Video, and that the same type of thing could happen. Like, somebody could just throw Blockbuster Video's name into something, but that's obviously just me just being facetious. But Toys R Us, I think that's actually more literally what's going to happen. Is they're just gonna name something Toys R Us, most likely in a digital form. Probably you might even get a whole new website that's ToysRUs.com that sells toys, but you'll see at the bottom, like, you know, subsidiary of Amazon or whoever. And really, it's just a fancy way to brand the pre-existing toy department of someone else. That would be my guess. We will see. I mean, I'd love it. I would absolutely love it if we saw like a full rebirth of Toys R Us, because that whole situation was so sad. Toys R Us itself was doing well, but its parent company had basically forced a bunch of debt onto them, and in order to pay off that debt, they had to cheap out in certain areas, and they were actually doing fine. They just kind of ran out of time. A lot of people think, oh no, it's like Amazon or whoever put them out of business, but no, that's not the case. They just ran out of time. Eventually, if they had more time, they would have succeeded. They were actually a profitable company, but they also had to cut a lot of corners to maintain that, and it made them not as competitive. But it is what it is. So hopefully whatever version of them returns is even a tenth of what they were and is somewhat interesting to see. But to be honest, I'm not counting my chickens on that one, but we'll see. Moving on, another story here. This one's weird to me. Fox, aka now Disney, is apparently going to be re-releasing Deadpool 2 in theaters, but they're going to be doing a PG-13 cut. Now, at the time I record this, that's about all the factual information that we have. And a lot of people are just kind of questioning, why would you do that? First of all, the movie already came out. Second of all, it already has a physical, like, Blu-ray release. Like, it's done. Its time in the sun is over. Why are you putting it back in theaters? And why are you editing it? The conspiracy theory behind this, that may not actually be all that conspiratorial, it kind of makes sense, Disney, if you guys have been following the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe and the whole Fox thing where they have the X-Men and they have Deadpool and all these other things, now that Fox's Marvel characters, which basically include the Fantastic Four as well as the X-Men, Deadpool being technically part of the X-Men, now that Disney has bought Fox, 20th Century Fox, all those characters will revert over to Disney, meaning that they can finally use them again. Now, for the most part, that doesn't matter. Fox's version of the Fantastic Four was a disaster, and Disney's not going to keep it. Fox's version of the X-Men was in serious need of a reboot and a refresh anyway, so it doesn't matter. We can separate that one. The problem is Deadpool. Deadpool specifically has proven extraordinarily successful. Ryan Reynolds is an absolutely flawless cast for it, and it's exactly what Deadpool needed to be. So the point being, they kind of want to keep him as is, and they kind of want to throw him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, kind of retroactively throwing the two Deadpool movies within the continuity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, obviously, that's hard because they weren't designed to be that way, and they make all sorts of references to other universes. But in Deadpool's unique case, that kind of works, because his whole thing is breaking the fourth wall constantly. So it's as simple as being like, oh, I guess we jumped universes, I guess I'm just part of the MCU now, or whatever. Again, what does that matter? Well, Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe has more of a family-friendly tone. So one could argue the reason they're creating a PG-13 cut of Deadpool is that whenever they do start saying, hey, these movies are canon with ours now, they want to have like a safer version that they can sell in box sets. And maybe they want to warm people up to the fact that they're going to cool Deadpool off a bit when he shows up in the next movie. Less violence, less swearing, less all that. I'm not a fan of that concept. I want that to be very clear. I think Deadpool should be Deadpool. But I understand why, if the Avengers are doing all of their, PG, family-friendly stuff, he can't come in and, fucking violently murder people and swear and all that shit. I get that. But I've seen solutions that fans have suggested to that type of thing where, he'll make jokes about the fact that he can't do that. Or he'll try to swear and he'll just constantly bleep, and he'll be like, why do I hear a bleep? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, because he's the only character who can break the wall. So I don't really agree with this move of making a PG-13 version, but I guess the logic really is that they're just trying to prepare people for the fact that that's coming. Because other than that, I don't know why you would do this. But, we'll see, I guess. I have no intention of going to see a PG-13 version of Deadpool 2. I mean, I have a Blu-ray of it. I'm good. I have a Blu-ray of the real version. Apparently, also, they were at one point talking, the X-Force movie, but now I guess they're talking more Deadpool 3. This would also link back to that, I think, that Disney and Ryan Reynolds are talking about that, and they're coming to some sort of agreements. But, I'm glad that they're going to fold him in. That'll be cool. But this is not a great sign of how to do it. But I guess we'll see that. Next up, speaking of Disney again, this is a shocker to everyone in the Star Wars community. Disney extended the contract of Kathleen Kennedy for 3 years. Now, if you follow Star Wars stuff at all, under the Disney era, Kathleen Kennedy was George Lucas's hand-picked, apprentice, if you will, to take over for him when they sold it off to Disney. She was a contractual agreement as part of the sale, a condition of the sale. And under her, it's been very weird because you can look at it and say it's been very successful financially. I mean, Force Awakens made plenty of money. Rogue One made plenty of money. Last Jedi made a profit, but it underperformed to what they expected, and Solo outright bombed. Now, it's a long and complicated story, but the long and the short of it is a lot of people want her gone because they feel like she's kind of been screwing with Star Wars. Because when you look back at it, and it all, of course, boils down to personal opinion, but most people don't really seem to like the Disney era of Star Wars. Me personally, and I know I get shit for this, my favorite of the four that they've produced is Rogue One. Although Rogue One has a bunch of problems, it's still my favorite one. Because at one time Force Awakens was, but now Force Awakens to me really just feels way too much like A New Hope, and the Last Jedi proved that Force Awakens really had no grand plan. You can blame that on The Last Jedi, but the consequence of it is it just looks like there was no one steering the ship. You know what I mean? And of course, Last Jedi, as I just said, it really wasn't a very good film. Very divisive, obviously. That's all been talked to death. And Solo was a totally average movie, which was not becoming of Star Wars. So under her, a lot of questionable decisions have been made. And it's easy to blame her. I get that because she's the one in charge. But at the same time, it's a very difficult position to really cast and really get anyone to take, because nobody really wants the burden of responsibility with Star Wars. People forget that, that was one of the stories going around recently, is that no one really wanted that particular job because it's a lot of responsibility. It's a very difficult thing to do, and the fans will hate you kind of no matter what you do. And so people don't really want that. Even when, this problem goes back a long time. Like during the prequels, George didn't want to make those himself. He tried to get other people to do it. No one would touch it. Going back to the originals, even. Yes, Irvin Kershner did Empire. Yes, Randy Marquand did Return of the Jedi. But my understanding is, that they had to go with non-Directors Guild directors to make that stuff happen because nobody else really wanted to touch it. And while they turned out magnificently, Star Wars just has a history of being too big for anyone to really want to take it on, which is why George kind of always fell back into it, but now he's done. Now, she's not, the director behind the movies, of course, but she is ultimately the executive producer making decisions about what's going to get greenlit, what's not, and what kind of, perhaps, narratives to throw in there. A lot of people blame her for a lot of social justice warrior and, feminism type of stuff. I'm not here to comment on any of that, but people throw that at her, and it's very possible that that's true. So everyone thought she was out the door. So for them to surprise us with, she got a 3-year contract extension, well, it's surprising and confusing. Now, one can only really speculate as to why they did that, but I have basically, I think, 2 reasons why they did it. One, as mentioned before, they just didn't have anyone else to do it. Like, nobody will take that job. And so pressure kind of forced them to just keep her around. And basically the other reason was, well, her job at this point now can simply be to make the production of Episode 9 be as smooth as possible. J.J. Abrams some people considered him tentatively in charge of Lucasfilm because he was calling all the shots for Episode 9. What's possible is that's still basically the case, but since he's got to actually make the creative side of the movie, he shouldn't also be making business decisions. So it's very possible that Disney basically told Kathleen, look, we're going to give you a 3-year extension, but you really have no actual power. You just kind of have to do whatever JJ says and just make his job easier. And the plan here is just make everything smooth going up to Episode 9, make sure Episode 9 itself is smooth, everything revolving around the concept of ending Episode 9 and distribution, all that stuff, make sure that's smooth. And it also implies something about the length of the perhaps next movie gap, because we know now that they're slowing down on how many Star Wars films they're going to be producing. And we know now that they don't have another movie immediately in production or even really necessarily an idea of a next movie. And I think that that 3-year contract is really just tied to making sure that everything around Episode 9 is as smooth as possible. And, of course, to buy themselves more time to find someone else to take that job. I think that's most likely what it is. Because at the same time that they're doing this, they are completing the Fox merger. And any sort of disruption over at Disney makes that difficult. So if you have one giant division, the entire Lucasfilm division being kind of unstable, that doesn't look good to shareholders at the time of a merger. So my guess is this is just to calm them down and be like, look, everything's fine over there. We're just working on this one movie. It'll be great. Focus on this now. I think it's kind of a misdirect while they buy themselves some time. That's just my speculative guess. For all I know, they secretly love her and think that everything she does is flawless. I don't know. Because like I said at the beginning of this subject, when you look at it just on paper, 3 of the 4 movies she delivered made huge fucking money for them. So it's possible they're like, you're entitled to a bomb. That's it. I doubt it, because at the same time, that 3rd one also broke the fan base in a way that really needs to be repaired. And a lot of people pin that on her for kind of allowing that film. Like, it's kind of the you give a chimp a gun argument. Kathleen, in that case, is the person who gave the chimp a gun. The chimp being Rian Johnson. You know what I mean? Like, if you give him a gun, who do you blame when he shoots somebody? And I think that a lot of people still blame Kathleen Kennedy for that. So we'll see what happens after that. But, as I sit here and say, like, oh, it'd be great if they put someone else in charge, it's the same thing we do with politics. When we hate a politician, we're like, well, the other guy. without you're not so much for the other guy, you just kind of hate the current guy. But that's easy. You got to find someone else who's actually an objectively good replacement, and Disney doesn't have one lined up for that job. So that tells you something about how hard those gigs are. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of Star Wars, just a little note here. Jon Favreau, I'm sure you guys would know him even if you don't know the name. He directed the first 2 Iron Man movies. He plays Happy Hogan in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's in a whole lot of stuff too. I mean, prior to that, he's in the movie Swingers, and he made a whole bunch of stuff. Like, trust me, you'd recognize him if you saw him. He's in a lot of stuff. He's actually going to be directing a new Star Wars show called The Mandalorian. Now, The Mandalorian, we finally got a little bit of information about it. It's a bounty hunter show. Now, Mandalorians in Star Wars are basically Boba Fett's people. And in the show, I guess it's going to take place in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. And it's just going to be about bounty hunters and Mandalorians specifically, which sounds kind of like a cool premise. It's going to be a live-action show and all that stuff. At this point in time, that's kind of all we know, though. I'm happy about this because I really feel that the gap between Jedi and Force Awakens sorely needs repair. This would go way back into too much that I've already said in previous podcasts and videos and so forth, but one of the reasons I do not like the Force Awakens that much is it did an incredibly bad job of explaining the state of the galaxy. And as time has gone on and I've thought about it more, I realized that really was a huge issue, because the fact that Force Awakens basically opens with the resistance is the rebels are no longer the rebels, they're the resistance, and the Empire is no longer the Empire, they're the First Order. The First Order actually seems bigger and stronger and more impressive than the Empire ever was, and the resistance seems weaker and shittier and awful than the rebels ever were. The only difference is that the New Republic is, what came of the success of the original trilogy, but it's completely obliterated in like one shot in that movie and never does anything. It kind of invalidates the entire purpose of the original trilogy, which was to liberate the galaxy and impose a new leadership. A democratic leadership was one of the big goals, if not the goal, of the original trilogy. And Force Awakens tells us, no, that never happened, and it got actually a lot worse. But we're not going to say how or why. And that always bothered me. So having something in between that can be like, this is what happened, and this fill in some of those gaps, I think is important. At this point, you kind of have to treat Star Wars, if I'm Lucasfilm and I'm Kathleen Kennedy, well, hopefully someone more talented than Kathleen Kennedy, all right, let me put myself in there. Let me put it on record. I probably have no official business ever being in charge of something like Lucasfilm, although I'd love the gig. If I were to get in there, I'd say, look, we got to treat this kind of the way the Clone Wars team treated the prequels, which is you look and analyze the movies and you understand what George was going for, but you also see what the fans have issues with. You go in there and you fill those gaps. That's what Clone Wars did for the prequels. It was an amazing show that did an excellent job being like, remember that thing in episode 2 that didn't make sense? This is why. This is what solves that. Or remember this thing in episode 3 that we were building up to and whatever? This will solve that. Like they did a lot of that. And I think Disney needs to pull that card again. I think they need to look at their own new trilogy now and be like, these are the issues people have with our storytelling structure. We need to fill these gaps and make stuff make sense. And this is the perfect opportunity to do something like that. So I wish Jon Favreau luck. I mean, again, he was the original at the helm of the MCU. Granted, it was just in a directorial role. It wasn't in the overseeing, showrunner type of role like Kevin Feige is, but hell, I hope that he can do something with that. So, good luck. And moving on, we have yet another story about Disney that's very quick here because I just couldn't believe it when I saw this. So this is short. Disney apparently just requested, and perhaps is even greenlighting, a live-action Lilo and Stitch movie. Yeah. Stitch is gonna get a live-action movie! So that's the most I can do right now with my Stitch impression, considering I have a cold. But yeah, so I love Stitch, even though I always found that first movie to just be kind of okay, and I never really liked the others. I like the character of Stitch more than anything else. I obviously can do an impression of him, although that was probably not my best version of him, just, again, because of the cold. And And Disney's doing this thing now where they're making live action versions of all their like animated classics. Of course, Beauty and the Beast was a big one, and then they did Jungle Book, which actually I think Jon Favreau also made, incidentally. So now they're doing Lilo and Stitch. I guess they are doing Aladdin too. I don't think the world really needs a live action Lilo and Stitch, but whatever. It was more like I was just surprised to hear that this is actually going to be a thing. Because I've only seen Beauty and the Beast, at least of the ones I can remember. And I remember not liking it that much. I remember thinking, like, if I really wanted to watch this, I'd just watch the actual animated one. And I can't even say that they're doing the wrong thing, though, because each of those movies makes a truckload of money. So I can easily see why they keep greenlighting this stuff. But, you know, there you go. We're getting a live-action Lilo and Stitch, probably. And finally, as far as movie stuff here goes, at the time I record this, the new Venom movie is not out yet, though that's probably I think it's right around the corner. In fact, by the time this is live, I'm sure most of you will have already had the opportunity to see it if you want to. And I just got to ask the question, does anybody actually want to see that movie? I mean, I know you can't answer me in real time, but I have nothing but problems with the concept of that movie, because this takes so much explanation. I'll try to water this down. There's so many videos breaking this down in greater detail, but the long and the short of it is, when Sony has the rights to all of the Spider-Man characters, including Spider-Man himself, just for the movies. They don't own the characters, but they have their movie options. So even though Disney owns the characters and makes movies, they can't actually make Spider-Man or Spider-Man character movies because Sony still has possession of those from an ill-fated deal in the late 90s. Now, because Fox is done and in the House of Mouse now, Spider-Man and all those Spider-Man characters are kind of the last remnant of that original sale. That and Hulk, sort of. Hulk technically can't have his own movie without Universal Studios' consent, but they can use him in just ancillary roles, and it's fine. But that doesn't matter. Spider-Man, now you've noticed he started appearing in Avengers and Captain America Civil War and stuff like that, and of course Spider-Man Homecoming. That was through a deal. Sony became desperate after they made a bunch of mistakes with the character and after a bunch of financial flops, including things like 2016 Ghostbusters and all that stuff. Sony got kind of desperate. So they were willing to cut a deal with Disney. And the deal basically stated that Tom Holland would now play Spider-Man, and he would do it through a 6-picture deal. 3 of which were for Disney, which would be Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and then whatever Avengers 4 is. And then for Sony, they would do Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming 2, and then the theoretical Spider-Man Homecoming 3. Now, the problem with that was that part of that deal also stated that Disney basically create 5 of those films. Not 6, 5. They would obviously create their own 3, plus they would essentially make Spider-Man Homecoming 1 and 2. So they made Spider-Man Homecoming. Disney made that movie. Sony just kind of paid for it and then got to reap a whole bunch of benefits for it, which was probably one of the greatest deals they ever made. But people give me shit for thinking I hate Sony because I give them crap for other things. I don't. I really don't. I like Sony a lot. I really do. But as a film division, if you study film and study how the corporate politics of that stuff, Sony Film is the only company more incompetent than them is Paramount. Sony is right above them. They're a dumpster fire, and they make terrible, terrible decisions. So what does this have to do with Venom? Well, Spider-Man is currently on loan to Disney, in a sense, for movies. And in theory, we'll get back to the sixth movie thing. But in the meantime, what Sony can do is they're allowed, if they want to, as they always could, they can make other movies with Spider-Man characters. So they're making a Venom movie. They're making all these other character movies. Supposedly they're doing Kraven the Hunter and things like that. Now, those don't really work because Spider-Man is an essential part of all of those stories, but he's not allowed to appear in them. And then Amy Pascal, once very famous, she's one of the producers at Sony, very famously was sitting with Kevin Feige, and the two of them were on stage, and she just started talking about how her Venom movie is totally going to be part of the MCU, and the look on Kevin Feige's face was like, no, bitch. And then later, literally the next day, Disney put out a statement being like, nothing Amy Pascal or Sony said represents any of Disney's interests or whatever. In other words, it's not true. So the common belief here is Sony isn't just making Spider-Man spin-off movies just to do it, or maybe someone would like a Venom movie. No. The logic supposedly is build up their own Spider-Verse, if you will, so that when they get Spider-Man back, and presumably his brand hasn't been completely tarnished like they had done to him, then they can throw him into those movies and kind of hijack the MCU and kind of say retroactively, hey, look, all these like Sony Spider-Man movies we've been making now are part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Right on, Thor and Captain America are right in there in the Venom movie. You don't see them, but they're there. You know what I mean? Like, that's in theory what the plan is. That's where we get back to that sixth one. See, the problem is they have Tom Holland under contract for essentially a Spider-Man Homecoming 3 that Disney has nothing to do with. They could, if they wanted to, set up a film where he has to like fight all of these like spin-off villains all in one movie or something. And then it's kind of hard to argue that that's not canon, even though it wouldn't be. It's a really weird corporate political move. While at the same time, it can look like they're just trying to raise their stock value to make it look like, nah, man, Sony's fine. We're doing all this Marvel stuff. Maybe in an effort, I've even heard, in an effort just to make it Disney buy them, just to get the rights out of their hands because it's worth a ton of money. No one really knows how this is going to play out, but I will not be surprised, A, if the Venom movie completely sucks. Like, it's a movie that does not need to exist. And B, if it just kind of overall tarnishes and confuses the brand. I think it's going to be one of those things we look back on later at like Superman Returns. We're like, oh, that's right, that was a thing. How weird. Or Green Lantern, like, oh, that was the failed attempt to do something. Right, I remember that one. I think that's where Venom's going to go. I can't imagine this is actually going to be a successful thing that they launch here. Now, again, I haven't seen it. I'll see it at some point. But I don't see how that could possibly end up being useful for anybody. Look, on the one hand, I hate the idea of Disney being able to grab more and more power, but at the same time, I really wish that all the Marvel characters would just get into their possession. Just get the Spider-Man characters into their possession, call it a day, and stop with this bullshit. But in the meantime, this is the kind of stuff we're gonna have to put up with. So yeah, hopefully it's not the worst thing ever, but I actually don't really want it to be successful because I don't like the idea of them trying to hijack the MCU. Plus, if you're burning these characters now, then you're reducing Disney's ability to use them later, which is kind of the same problem that they're going to run into with the X-Men over at Fox or over at Disney. They've decided they're still releasing, much to my surprise, they're still going to release the first of the, excuse me, the Dark Phoenix trilogy. They're not going to make the other two, but they're going to at least release the last Fox one, and then probably New Mutants as well, which means they're just going to have to take that much longer before they can incorporate the Disney version of the X-Men into the MCU, which I don't like, but I get why they're doing it, but I don't like it. So that's that. If you guys are going to see it, let me know. I'm curious. So now it's time for a round of shout-outs. All of these people are wonderful people who donate to my Patreon and are at the appropriate level in which they get a shout-out, so thank you very much to all of you. If you want to donate and ever get a shout-out or, you know, pick a subject or, hell, be on the podcast, that is an option. At any time, just go to patreon.com/Adam Koralik and you can sign up. Any amount, up to you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the support. So shout-outs. Justin Webb, Jonas Pachonka, Corey Marsh, Jesse Perez, Happy Gaming House, Rob Janos, Louis Bonilla, Michael Kelly, Eric Perales, Trey Wagner, and Tim Inman. Thank you very much. Once again, that's Justin Webb, Jonas Pachonka, Corey Marsh, Jesse Perez, Happy Gaming House, Rob Janos, Luis Bonilla, Michael Kelly, Eric Perales, Trey Wagner, and Tim Inman. Thank you guys. You guys are all awesome. So next up, this is just kind of something I was just thinking about. When I was at a convention not too long ago, I think it was AVGC, I did a Q&A, and I was asked a question that I'd never been asked before, even though it's a really basic one. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the guy's name who asked me, but he basically asked me, he's like, so you do all this stuff, you're flying around, you're going to this and that. When you're at home and you're not working, what is your downtime? Do you just sit around and play video games? And I was like, actually, no, because video games, as much as I love video games, that's not always what I want to do when I want to chill. And so he's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, I kind of tend to watch a lot of TV. And he's like, well, what kind of TV? And then I was just like, I thought about it for a second. I'm like, my go-to, as weird as it sounds, TV I'm watching currently, Mayday Air Disasters. You guys ever watch that show? It's like Forensic Files in the sky. It's fucking great. I love stuff like that, or Forensic Files. I like a lot of stuff that, as much as I love shows that require marathoning, that have like a great storyline and all that stuff, because of the nature of my job now, I don't always get to sit down and commit to that. So stuff like Mayday Air Disasters or Forensic Files is great because you can basically just catch one and you're good for a while. So yeah, if anybody who's ever curious about me, that's something I like to do. There you go. Next subject here. If you guys don't, I mean, obviously you guys associate me with Shenmue, probably. I talk about it from time to time. Two things I want to mention there. One, to anybody who didn't know, there was a company in France, I want to say Pixel Love. It's a website. They just got authorization and are now selling a collector's edition of the Shenmue re-release for both PS4 and Xbox One. It comes with like an art book and some poster type of things, I think. It's not done through Sega. They have Sega's permission, but the Sega is not making it, unlike the Japanese limited edition, which is made in-house by Sega. So just thought people might want to know about that. But the real reason I was actually bringing this up about Shenmue is a lot of people over the years have asked me like, hey man, are you ever going to like stream Shenmue or play it on your channel or anything like that? What you may not know is I have been doing that. I have been streaming it over on Twitch, twitch.tv/GameSocietyPimps. I've been streaming it there like every couple of weeks. Of course it's Twitch, so they get deleted, but I've downloaded and rehosted them over on Game Society 2. So if you look at youtube.com/GameSociety2, you can actually find all of my Twitch streams of Shenmue. If you're a Shenmue fan, Corey Marshall actually makes cameos from time to time. We just call him in and he just chats and hangs out for a bit. So yeah, for anybody who's ever curious about that, that's the thing. You can go over there. So that's about it for that. A couple of power round subjects because we're actually getting close to the end here, but a few more things I want to talk about. This is just a very small subject. Elon Musk is stepping down from, I believe it's from Tesla. He made a tweet, like a joke tweet about, stocks or whatever. And it was just a joke, but it apparently, caused massive havoc with the stock market. And that's power, man, when you can do that. But anyway, because of that, he was forced to step down, which really sucks. But that, yeah, be careful when you tweet, guys. We've seen way too many times people just say stupid things or they just, brain fart about something and it costs them a lot. Now, Elon Musk, I'm sure, will be fine, but it's still unfortunate that happened to him. So, yeah, just another one of those reminders that, man, you got to be careful when you tweet stuff. Make sure you actually, what you say, you actually want to stay out there. Because once it's out there forever. So, yeah, that's that. Next thing, this is a small thing that I thought PC gamers might enjoy knowing if they don't. Now, I'm not a PC gamer. I've been saying that for years. Nothing against it. It's just never been my thing. I always found it kind of cold and technical. Not in the sense that like, oh, I don't understand how Steam works. I don't mean like that. I mean like, to me, a console is a package deal. A console is not only the games and the unit, but like the history and the controllers, like the charm of it. It's hard to put in. It's a package deal. PCs don't really have that for me, and they never will. That's not their nature. They're meant to be efficient. But for those who do game on PC, I found this to be an interesting update. So Windows 10 has rolled out an update now called Game Mode. So basically, if you have that enabled, is my understanding, is that Windows updates will no longer prompt you when you're playing a PC game. Yeah, that must sound nice, because I know during recording sessions for my other channel, for Game Society Pimps, that's definitely been an issue, where we'll be playing or streaming or whatever, and all of a sudden Windows will pop up and be like, it's time for an update, and you're like, oh shit. Windows will no longer do that, provided you have game mode enabled. So if you are a PC gamer, make sure you hit that and, enjoy that, all the benefits of that, because I could see why that would be annoying as hell. Especially, if consoles did that, it would annoy the shit out of me. So I completely get that. So there you go, guys. Another small thing here that actually is kind of a big deal. PSN supposedly is about to start rolling out an update that'll allow you to change your usernames, which has been a big deal for a lot of people on PSN for a long time. People have wanted to change their names. Now, I guess with PSN, part of the problem is that it could have bricked certain games, and that was one of the concerns they had. But I guess now they're starting to work on that and see if they can patch that out and all that kind of stuff. But if the rumors are to be believed, the time is coming where you will be able to change your PSN username, which personally I also would like to do, because it was one, I established like right after high school. Like I'd like to change it. But maybe I'll be able to do that. I don't know. But maybe for a fee. My guess is they'll charge for that. Hopefully not, but my guess is they will. Maybe the first time will be free. I think that's how Xbox does it. The first time's free, and after that, you have to pay for it so you don't abuse it. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, personally, I would get some use out of that, and I hope you guys would too. Next thing up, apparently, hacked Switches can now run emulators. This was only a matter of time, but again, now a whole bunch of emulators are running on Switches. Things from like the obvious, like NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo, all that stuff is able to run on there now, which I think is really cool. Not personally something I would ever intend to use. I mean, I can see why people would. You know, it's a great little portable device, and the ability to play just a multitude of consoles on it is awesome. So more power to them. But yeah, we'll see what else runs. Apparently, some people are saying you can get PS1 to run on it too, which is cool. I'm more impressed when you get really more advanced consoles to start running on it. I'm tired of seeing like, oh look, we got the NES to run on this thing. It's like, yeah, and the NES will run on a calculator at this point. Like, it'll run on anything. Impress me. So if you're like, oh man, we got PlayStation 2 to run on the Switch, I'm like, okay, that would intrigue me. I would find that fascinating. But so far, you know, that's opening the door, and we'll see where it goes from there. Now, would I use it? Still, probably not, but I do find the idea of it fascinating. And staying on the subject of the Switch, this is another subject, but still about the Switch. If to be believed, Nintendo is supposedly working on a new version of the Switch that would mostly have better screen and battery life. Some people are, speculating, oh, it might be like a Switch Pro or a Switch X. I mean, I wouldn't actually call them those names, but, a Switch that has more capable hardware that's not as, basically 7th gen tech, that it could actually pull off more. Will that be the case? I don't know. Maybe. I would think more likely it's probably something like a better screen and better battery life. If there's some additional processing power in it, that's certainly a possibility. It's not like Nintendo's never done that. The new 3DS was like that. We'll have to see. I think the real reason, though, this is my understanding, was that there was something about the original Switch where you could hack it, but the hack was not fixable for Nintendo. If they detected a hacked unit, all they could do was prevent it from getting online anymore. They couldn't do anything else. They couldn't brick it. They couldn't report it, because the hack is hardware-based, not software-based, which is part of the other reason I think that they want to release a new model, is that people can't do that exploit anymore. I think that's more likely the case. And then while they're in there, they might as well improve some stuff. I would guess that's it. But, you never know. We'll see as time goes on. But, would you guys pick that up? I would have no reason to pick up a newer model of a Switch with a better screen and better battery life, because I don't really play mine portably that much anymore. If it was more hardware capable, that would be another argument. But, it would also have to be a pretty significant upgrade for me to really care, because it's been almost a year since the Xbox One X is out, and I still haven't picked that up. So we'll see about the Switch, but I'm not there yet. But, time will tell. And then our last subject here, I do apologize for the shorter nature of this podcast, but again, as you can tell, my throat's kind of burning. It's kind of on fire, and it's taking a lot for me not to just start coughing and sneezing. So apologies for that. But I just want to talk on one last subject here before we head out. The last thing is just upcoming conventions opportunities. By the time most of you are hearing this, unfortunately, this will be over. So Patreon backers, I hope you guys hear this. I will be going to the Portland Retro Game Expo, obviously in Portland, Oregon, which is, I think, October 18th through the 22nd, something like that. And people in the UK, I will be in Blackpool for the Blackpool Play Expo. Play Expo Blackpool, I believe is what it's called. In Blackpool, UK, I believe from like the 26th through the 29th of October. So if you're in those areas, come on out. I will be there. I'm at Portland. I'm going to be mostly hanging around the Castlemania Games booth. Castlemania Games is a seller of, video game peripherals run by Ryan. He's an awesome guy. You can, I'll be mostly there with like John Riggs, but a whole bunch of other people, other YouTubers you guys would know are there. See, I've never been to the Portland Retro Game Expo, but everyone kind of says it's like the one to go to, even if you're not a guest, which I'm not. Just go to that one to have a good time. So I was brought out there, but not as an official guest of the convention. So I'm very honored by that. So I'm going to go and enjoy it the best I can. I think it'll be a great time. And as for Blackpool, that I'm 100% a guest for. They're bringing me out and all that stuff. So again, I've never done a convention in the UK before, so this will be the first time. So I hope you, well, at least as a guest. So I hope you guys, anybody in the UK gets the chance, they want to come up for that. I'd love to see you. We're going to be doing, it's like a Dreamcast specific thing we're going to be doing. So that'll be a lot of fun. We were this close to having Corey Marshall go. I can't specifically say why he couldn't go, but it was this close to happening, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And then last but not least, this is down the road. I'm now going to be a guest at the SAC GamerCon in Sacramento, California on December 9th of this year. So if you're in Sacramento or anywhere around there and you want to hang, come to the SAC GamerCon. Myself and Radical Reggie will be there. I'm not sure what other guests will be there at this point in time, but the two of us will be for sure. So come on out if you want to. It'll be an awesome time. Great to always meet more people. And for now, that's it, guys. Thank you very much to everyone on Patreon who supports me over there, or anybody who's just listening to this on the public. If you want to, of course, support over there, that would be awesome. If not, no worries. So thank you very much to Tim, Trey, Eric, Michael, Luis, Rob, Happy Gaming House, Jesse, Corey, Jonas, and Justin. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you all later.